The Pokemon YouTuber Nortist recently came out with a video about how they're developing a team shooter Pokemon-like game. I'm a really big fan of this YouTuber, and they're one of the reasons why I started making YouTube videos in the first place. If you haven't watched their video already, I would definitely go and watch it before, but make sure you come back to this video because I want to go through my ideas for how I would implement my favorite Pokemon into this game. If you haven't guessed from the channel mascot and the fact that I bring it up in pretty much every other video, my favorite Pokemon is Crawdaunt, and the Crawdaunt line as a whole. I love Corphish as well. I think they're both really fun Pokemon, and I will probably make another video about why I love these two little crustaceans so much, but that's for another time. I wanted to bring up that I've actually started another channel where I talk about movies and comic books, another passion of mine, and I've just made a video about how I would have rewritten the Super Mario movie, or how I would have written it if I was in charge of it. It won't appeal to everybody, but if you're interested, the link's in the description, and I would really appreciate it if you checked it out. I think that Crawdaunt would be a great Pokemon to add into a team shooter because it's quite a unique Pokemon, and it also has a very defined way of how it could be played. I think that the way that Crawdaunt would play in a team-based shooter is very similar to how it plays in Pokemon. It is a wall breaker designed to do massive amounts of burst damage all at once. It's relatively frail, it has a medium speed, but its main thing is that it has a huge damage potential and just can go from like 0 to 100 in nothing. Of course, we're going to have to implement why Crawdaunt is so good at doing this in the game, and that's its ability adaptability. This could go pretty much 1-for-1 in that its stab moves basically just become a whole lot more powerful. You would probably tweak a few of the numbers, but I think other than that, it wouldn't really need any changes. If you still haven't watched the Nortist video, even though I recommended that you did, you should definitely go and watch it. If you're at this point, this is the second time in the video that I'm telling you to go and watch it. In that, they described that every Pokemon would have a certain amount of moves that they could pick from, but they would also all have a signature move which they would have to make them feel a bit more unique from each other. With Crawdaunt, this would pretty obviously be Crabhammer. I know that there are various other crustacean-based Pokemon who also get access to this move, but I love Crawdaunt the most out of them, so Crawdaunt is the crustacean that I'm pushing forward into this game. The way I envision Crabhammer working is that it's a type of diving move, so Crawdaunt would jump at a foe, and you could have it be a kind of slam down, or if you hit the opponent directly, it deals really high damage. Obviously, as it's a move that kind of propels you forward, it would be quite difficult to use in close range, but it helps make up for Crawdaunt's relative lack of speed in that it allows them to chase down or kind of jump into the fray. Crawdaunt's also pretty frail, so it could be a way to get out of danger as well. As for the moves that I think could be interchangeable, the first of these is Knockoff, which would again be another close range move. It would deal much less damage, but obviously it has the effect of knocking off an item, and I think if you're going to do this in a team shooter game where the matches are probably going to be a bit more prolonged, I wouldn't have it be that they knock off an item, maybe you just nullify it for a little bit. You could also have it so that maybe it gets knocked off, but then they can pick it back up, like it physically appears in the game. It really just is a matter of taste. I think either of those would be quite effective. If you were going for just pure damage, however, I would also include Crunch as a move that Crawdaunt learns. Crunch would function very similar to Knockoff, just obviously with the change that it's more guaranteed damage and has less of an effect afterwards. It's also much more spammable of a move, so Crawdaunt could use it, and then this could be the main damaging move that it does when it's actually in the fray of battle. If you're going to include Crunch, then I'd also say Liquidation would be a good move to include, and it would essentially just be a reskin, just instead dealing water type damage rather than dark type damage like Crunch does. Both of these would obviously provide a stat drop as they do in the games, and due to the absence of switching in this new format, I think that instead all stat drops should be temporary. So maybe for 5 or 10 seconds afterwards, you're affected by the stat drop, but then it comes back. I think that this would be much more manageable, just as it means that if you get hit by a stat drop, you're not then affected by that for the rest of the time until you have to respawn again. Because this is more for stat boosting, because if you were able to stat boost up, it would really just make you spiral out of control and snowball, especially if it was only until you respawned that your stats reset. Those moves I think would be the main moves that Crawdaunt would use, but you could also give it some extra moves just to give it even more variety. Aqua Jet is kind of redundant, as Crabhammer does a very similar thing, but I imagine that it would be a kind of short range dash attack, which would be on a much faster cooldown than something like Crabhammer. It would obviously be much weaker, but could be something that Crawdaunt uses to patch up its kind of mediocre speed. I imagine that a lot of priority moves would work in a very similar way. Close combat is also a move that Crawdaunt has in its arsenal, and this one to me is very simple in how you implement it. It's a really high damage, really close range attack, which after you use it, gives you a period of vulnerability. This would make it kind of an ultimate move in that you would use it to finish off a Pokemon or deal a lot of damage to a lot of Pokemon in a very small area. But obviously you have to consider if you don't get those KOs, then you're going to be vulnerable and another Pokemon could easily come in and just take you out. This is very similar to how the move works in regular mainline Pokemon games. A move that you don't really see in competitive Pokemon used on Crawdaunt or any Pokemon for that case is Vice Grip. But I think that because it's such a unique move, it could really be helpful in this new format that we're developing. I see it as a kind of snare move, a move which slows down or kind of limits a Pokemon from getting away from Crawdaunt. As I mentioned before, Crawdaunt is all about heavy, quick, burst, close range damage, and having a move that basically allows you to trap a Pokemon in would be really helpful for its kit. You could jump in using Crabhammer, snare someone, deal damage with close combat, and then try and get out. It's all about just dealing massive amounts of damage in as quickly as possible. The final two moves that I would want to talk about are actually status moves. As I mentioned before, when handling stat changes, I think that it should definitely be done in a temporary manner, and this could mean that Dragon Dance and Swords Dance are kind of moves that give you short-term power-ups. Imagine you're hiding behind a corner, use Dragon Dance, and now you're suddenly super quick and hit even stronger, and then you kind of jump in to the team battle, help out everyone, and then get straight out of there. Swords Dance would work in a very similar way, but obviously it's all about even more power. It doesn't give you that speed boost. I think that these would be incredibly fun moves to have, as it gives you a temporary change or power boost to how you play the game. Nortis talks a lot about having their game be very similar to Team Fortress 2, and Team Fortress has a lot of mechanics that work like this. Think of the Uber Charge or the Demo Night. They all have these short-term effects which really change how the characters play. This has been a bit of a weird video for me, as normally I talk about Pheromoning in the actual game of Pokemon, but I watched the video from Nortis and I was just really excited to make this video because I think that Crawdaunt would be a great addition to a game like this, and if you can think of any other moves that you associate with Crawdaunt, let me know, because I think building on this could be really fun. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. Thank you.